Today we're talking with an agency exec at Brick City Greenhouse. The topic is healthcare marketing with a focus on marketing to healthcare pros. If you think marketing to healthcare pros will move the needle for your brand, this episode is for you.
Welcome to What's on Tap, your prescription for digital health marketing.
Hi, I'm Rafael Cosentino. I'm Vice President of Business Development for Tap Native. Tap Native is an ad platform focused on health and medicine, and our native ads targeting consumers or healthcare pros appear inside the content of thousands of websites like healthday.com, drugs.com, webmd.com, helio.com, American Diabetes Association, and many others. We have a special guest today, and he's a friend. Todd Greene is SVP Omnichannel Marketing at Brick City Greenhouse, which is an award-winning healthcare ad agency. Welcome, Todd Greene.
Hey, nice to connect again, buddy.
I loved your website. What types of clients do you guys work with? What are you doing for them? What is your focus?
Yeah, well, yes, Brick City Greenhouse is a small and nimble niche agency. So our clients are really pharma and biotechs that are typically startups, or at least they have that startup mentality, right? So a lot of times the client marketers are on small but mighty teams and they're launching a product for the first time. Other times they're part of a smaller brand within a huge organization and they may not be getting the attention they need from other bigger agencies, right? Solve the meaty, creative problems that clients have if they're in that startup mindset.
In terms of like the messaging that you're coming up with, you're not buying media. You're just helping them come up with the messaging. And are you recommending formats and channels and things like that?
Yeah, 100%. We are more of on the creative and strategy side. So we don't do media buying. And I think that's another thing that we work really hard to do is be very transparent on what we do. We're small. We stay intentionally small so we can provide those really hands-on services. So we, like a lot, I think the bigger agencies, they'll try to grab the media buys and they'll try to grab the strategic planning and the creative. And, there's a place for that. And there's certain clients that need that sort of full service offering. But for us, we're very transparent on what we do and don't provide. And we do not do the media planning, but we work hand in hand with the media companies for sure. And we even recommended media companies to clients quite a bit.
And do you have a sense of what's moving the needle for them, whether it's DTC or HCP or what channels?
Yeah, I mean, most of us, when we're in that startup mindset and with those more startup-like clients, it really is very often focused on the HCPs and really getting attention and understanding from the physicians. And so that is where most of our work lies. And we do help them reach physicians from many different channels, right? And we don't dismiss. I'm by nature a digital marketer, but we don't dismiss the role of in person, the role of conferences, the role of reps and sales reps themselves. We work hard to get rep advisory boards involved as often as we can to help co-create the messaging and the content and get validation from them. We work really hard to have interviews directly with the physicians and the KOLs and do that market research and kind of triangulate and get all this input from the different core members that this messaging really matters for. So that is a very important part, and it is really a priority for most of our clients. And much of our clients is getting the right HCPs and the right reps and the right marketers, of course, involved in kind of the co-creation of the messaging and the positioning.
Wow, that's great. And the last time we spoke, you mentioned some of your clients are still buying print and they're finding that pretty effective. And certainly nobody gets fired for buying print, especially in a well-known, journal. Do you find that that's moving the needle still, and that's where maybe a lot of the attention and a lot of the budget's going?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, there's a place for, I think there's definitely still a place for print, especially reps. They need items to hand out, and they need tangible graphs to point to, and there are some digital viz aids that they use also, of course, but there's a blurred line, I think, between digital and tangible materials anymore, because the tablet itself is tangible, but even though you didn't actually print something out. So but it might be the same use case, right? Just maybe a little more interactive, and yeah, we do see some successes from print buys, and the media agencies we partner with will find these niche publications. They're really, there's a ability to direct mail, and obviously these journals are mailed to their subscribers and to these physicians, right? And so there's that good old fashioned, tangible delivery mechanism that the nurses can see, the office staff can also see. And there's also the ability, I think a lot of clients aren't initially aware of the digital and technological and database abilities of print anymore. You can use print and still target by NPI. You can do some direct mailing and filter out some of these lists, and only a certain niche or a certain segment of these physicians receive your ad or receive your direct mail piece. And so I think it's easy to kind of look at things as old school, but I think where some of the magic lies is some of the combinations between the newer technologies and these more traditional platforms, and even those direct mail video pieces, right? They're not necessarily cheap, but when like you were talking about, if you're talking about a handful of really high value and important physicians, I mean, a $40, $50 direct mail piece may very well be worth it, and especially if it's got a video of your KOL explaining and walking through a mechanism of disease and the mechanism of action, and it's trackable with QR codes, and there's some really interesting things that I think you can do.
Oh, that's really interesting. We have recently added the mailing address using AI. Actually, we have a match table of 7.3 million HCPs, and we added the best mailing address using AI. And so now when a user clicks on your ad, you also get their mailing address. And as I was telling you earlier, I don't know how much it is to send a postcard now. Maybe it's 35 cents. Why a person, if you're getting 12 clicks a day or even 100 clicks a day, why a person wouldn't just hand write a postcard? Hey, Dr. Greene, thanks for coming to our website. If you need any other information, let me know. Look me up on LinkedIn. Thanks, Raf. It's a real personalized email. And as we said, there's no one channel sort of moving the needle. Omnichannel is all these different things. And I think it's print, a postcard, getting a disk drive, a little thumb drive at an event, getting a tchotchke mailed to you, all these things that make it real. That's now the barrier. There's so many things you have to do. And by the time you hit number 4 or 5, they go, hey, this is real. I've heard a KOL talk about it. I got the tchotchke. I got the little thumb drive. I've got this. I got that. I got a postcard. I got somebody on LinkedIn messaging me. This must be real.
Sometimes it's just about brand repetition, right? It goes back to your good old fashioned like marketing and advertising 101, right?
Right.
Just can you recall the brand when it matters? Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
I do think there is a level of potential creepiness. We've heard this in some market research of, like, do I really want to tell these doctors that I know what they did, right? I feel like that's one of the major challenges we have here in 2025, and trying to identify, how to use data, but not use it so much that it backfires. Because I think we have heard it directly from market research that people do have that concern, whether they're patients or whether they're HCPs. But I think there's a nice balance between, like, you may not necessarily need to say, hey, I know you went to the website and you went to this page and you were on the page for 45 seconds and you clicked on this button. You might just the next day have your rep reach out to them and say, hey, would you like some information on this, right?
So I think
go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that because it affects the pricing model too. You can buy clicks on a CPC basis, right? Targeting HCPs, or you can buy it on a CPM basis. Our technology actually allows you to put the doctor's name in the headline or other information about them. So it could say, the headline might say, Dr. Greene, Cleveland Clinic wants to recruit you. And if you're paying on a CPC basis, the person might not be interested in being recruited. He just wants to know why the hell his name is in the headline of this ad on the webpage.
Have you heard some feedback from some of your?
We get emails all the time from people. Hey, what's going on? So there's a real, there's real questions about privacy, and you don't want to be. I mean, certainly if you're gonna do stuff like that, and you're trying to get the shock click, I want to pay on an impression basis. I don't want to pay on a CPC basis. It's more than just, having dynamic advertising that shows up based on the person's specialty or profession or location or hospital affiliation or all kinds of other information that's available. It's also about customizing the landing page that they get to. So now, if an oncologist in Cleveland that works for Cleveland Clinic lands on a page, it can have, the latest oncology information, news about Cleveland Clinic, other information that they might be affiliated with. So this is really cool stuff. It sort of leapfrogs the HCP in their learning, and it gets them next step closer to where they want to be. So you talk about sequencing and retargeting, and that's one form of getting them from one step to the next step to the next step and making sure that each message point is being driven home. It's another thing to take advantage of every time they visit one of the sites that you own and operate and show additional information to build on that messaging. Because you know they already got 1 and 2. Now it's time for 3. You know that they saw the rep. So, I sort of envision almost like a sales force for KOLs where, you know what step they're in this sort of experience, and this whole, experience you're engineering for them online and offline and in print and digital drives and all these things. So,
oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I think omnichannel can become, that term alone can become a little scary, especially if you're like I said, a lot of our clients are maybe smaller, may not have the budgets, they may not have the huge tech stacks and database installs that a lot of bigger clients may have. So they hear that word and they think money and they think complicated. But some of the examples that you're pointing out here about the retargeting and just sort of the sequencing of messages are fairly easy ways to execute on omnichannel. You really just need to know what this user did on a certain web page or even on a certain offsite media tactic, and then send them the next message, in a day or two or in a week or two. And just that retargeting and sequencing is pretty standard technology across any of the social platforms and the paid search platforms and even some of the display networks. And so that is a fairly easy way to execute on something that might sound a little overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about this analogy for all marketers, which is, there's a couple of them, but one of them is sort of rolling the snowball, trying to get the snowball to roll down the hill so it can pick up mass and speed and momentum and eventually sort of roll on its own. And, the idea of creating these experiences where you take the HCP or the consumer through this sort of engineered experience which builds credibility, which builds excitement, which maybe gets them to act, push them one step further in their journey, whether it's the consumer seeking some sort of help or getting information about it or at least understanding it, or getting the HCP to understand the mechanism of action and other patient information that they need to know so they can feel comfortable prescribing it. All marketers want this to be shorter, right? They don't want to, if you're going to spend $1,000 marketing to an HCP before you get a single script written, or you're going to spend $300 marketing to a consumer, they're always trying to shorten that number or, make that number smaller. Obviously, the less they can spend, the more effective ways they can find to do it. In terms of the shrinking web, what do you think that's going to be next? When you think about AI and programmatic sort of shrinking because ad-supported sites are shrinking, what do you think might do that, shorten that time to get doctors to act and consumers to act?
I might argue that this is a lot of what we do with clients is we do pre-launch, unbranded DSE and DSA type campaigns and programs. So one of my major answers might not be exactly tactically what you're thinking of, but it's, get ahead of it. If you're a startup and you kind of know how clinical trials are panning out and when expected PDUFA dates and launches will be, they're hopefully you have your treatment will have a uniqueness to it that requires a little bit of education. And so even before launch, the way you shrink that is you get physicians primed, you get them to understand some of the things that are happening, where the unmet need might be, and you start your media and you start your positioning and your messaging in an unbranded fashion pre-launch, and you really start educating more than you are marketing, right? Because if you're bringing something new to the market, it's going to take time for physicians to understand and identify the difference, and is it a real difference, and the data that comes out of the clinical trials, and really understanding that and digging into it. So the way you can shorten that time to script or decrease the amount of money it takes to get branded ads and marketing working is to have a market already primed through DSE and DSA. And I'm not sure if your audience is really familiar with those terms, but DSA, disease state awareness, or DSE, disease state education, is really kind of that unbranded pre-launch type of messaging and positioning and education that really helps the launch be much more effective. I'm sure you've seen, with your network, you probably see a big difference between some of the branded and unbranded, the sort of therapeutic category type education versus the direct response brand mention type ads, right? You probably get that experience and get different response rates and different types of physicians and segments of physicians reacting to those different type of ads, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we talk all the time that our parent company, eHealthcare Solutions, sells branded banners. They sell sponsorships. They sell all sorts of other things. They represent hundreds of publishers, medical associations. So we've got we sell print. We've got every bag of tricks. We sell native at Tap Native, and we also are now doing retargeting just from our dashboard at Tap Native. So there's all sorts of really, amazing things. And, I have my own personal opinions on what moves the needle for most brands, but it depends. And everything is an exception depending on where it is, if it's a product launch, if it's sort of if the drug or product has reached its maturity. I talk about Salonpas a lot. I think it's a great brand. They've built a lot of trust and a lot of credibility. I love it because it's OTC. There's no, there's no negative side effects like addiction or things like that many pain relievers have. And they have engineered a fantastic way to create an experience for doctors, and they know exactly what it costs. And it has to do with getting them to click a Tap Native ad, retargeting that doctor, sending them a sample package with Salonpas samples that they hand to the patient. So think about that, the holy grail. If you're a patient and the doctor hands you something, here, Todd, here's something for your elbow pain or your joint pain. I mean, that's the holy grail. And from a doctor's point of view, if you're going to hand something to a patient, you really have to trust it. So you now become an advocate even when the samples run out. I mean, that's just a natural human law. So they know what that costs, and they know what their ROI is there. And again, they also send the postcard with the handwritten note and all that. And so
sounds like they systemized it, and
they've systemized it,
built
and they
out
know
this
exactly,
process.
and they measure it, and it works. And we're happy to be a part of that chain. We help fulfill a lot of those pieces. But they measured it, and we were doing some other things for them too, and they stopped doing that because they know what works and what doesn't. And as an agency or as a media company or whoever it is, you can have a hunch what's moving the needle for them. But it feels to me, in all my years of doing this, that they certainly do know, and a lot of times they don't want to necessarily tell you or tell anybody because it's sort of a secret, right? It's a secret for their own
Wait,
brand.
who knows? You're saying some clients
I'm
might know,
saying
like the marketers themselves
if I'm
might
a
know?
brand, absolutely. If I'm a brand and I know who my competition is, and just Salonpas, they have many OTC competitors that are available in grocery stores and retail. I don't want to, necessarily say exactly what's moving the needle. And again, we're just
You're not going to go on LinkedIn or go on like a Tap Native podcast and start saying like
right.
exactly
Right.
what you do.
Here's exactly what we're spending our money on, and we're just one component of what they're doing. But I know some other things that they're doing. I'm not going to, I can't spill the sauce. They would get angry. But the point is that as a brand, you understand what that is. It depends, because once you crack the code, you know what that is, and you're not going to tell anybody. And hopefully it gets passed down from brand manager to product manager and all these marketing people, so it stays within the company. But I think a lot of companies can forget it. Like Coca-Cola has the recipe in their safe somewhere. Somebody forgets it, and then all is lost.
Yeah. No, it's true. There's I think that's like constant in marketing. Even my whole career with clients is like, wow, once you discover something, you're like, what do I do with this? Apart from wash, rinse, repeat and
Right.
like blow up and continue to do well at what I do, what do I do with this information? You feel like you've hit some, yeah, I think you said holy grail. And you're like, how do I share that? I think it obviously in advertising, when you have multiple clients, there might be ways to sort of learn from it, but I mean, you cannot share proprietary information.
Right.
And so it does become kind of this. That's one of the values I think agencies bring. Quite honestly, is they see what works and what doesn't work. Frankly, I mean, I think knowing what will probably not work is just as valuable as knowing what will work sometimes.
We spoke about the PR stunt for the movie Now You See Me, Now You Don't. It was an amazing, I thought it was an amazing PR stunt where they took over the Jumbotron in Times Square. And it started in the morning. This was in early, or I guess it was in late April. But the Jumbotron started filling up with cash. And something at the top said, text this number to see some magic. And a bunch of people began texting and getting these responses. And at the end of the day, the Jumbotron had filled up with cash and then it suddenly disappeared. And all the people who had texted received something like $119 from Venmo. And it was this stunt from Now You See Me, Now You Don't. But all those people who received money went on Facebook and Twitter and even LinkedIn, and they posted about it, and it became this massive viral sensation. I wonder why we don't see PR stunts like that in healthcare. I mean, certainly there are some therapeutic categories, I don't know, allergies or, GERD or things like that where you can be playful and do stunts like that. But, I mean, where's all the PR?
Well, we are talking about a highly regulated and highly sensitive industry. So I think that's probably 80% of your answer right there is, you have MLR teams and legal teams and medical teams who need to filter and approve these initiatives. So I think that's probably your biggest answer. I think the other answer might be also kind of like what we were talking about earlier, is the audience. Will that work for the right audience? I mean, how many of those who participated were actually physicians who are prescribing something for like a liver disease, right? So I think when you get down into these niches, I will say when you will see some good work, and a lot of the pharma award shows will show it, but you see a lot of the really creative PR stunts and really creative award-winning campaigns are some of the DSE, DSA, or kind of the unbranded initiatives that are collaborations with some advocacy organizations. And that's where you really get a lot more creative freedom. You're raising awareness of a condition rather than scripts of a medication. And so I think you do get to see some of those there. You're still, you look at things like Major League Baseball and its breast cancer awareness, right? And how they stop the games and people hold up signs. There's initiatives like that I think, they're not necessarily pharma. They're more condition type awareness and treatment awareness type things. But I do think there is going to be a new world, and it's not necessarily new. I think it's an evolution of current SEO and PR where, your mentions in media matter a lot more. Your mentions in trusted publications matter a lot more with these answer engines. And they've always sort of mattered with SEO and inbound links and your mentions. Over time, the link was sort of replaced with a brand mention. And I think that's happening even more now. It's where does your brand become more of this trusted source, or do your KOLs or do your patient advocates become these trusted sources themselves? And are they publishing, and are they being mentioned, and are they writing, and are they becoming leaders who are mentioning your condition or your treatment or your DSA initiative and becoming part of the results of these answer engine queries that also may have links to your sites or their platforms, but more importantly, they're just trusted. And over time, if you're not in a hurry and you're doing DSA and DSE type initiatives, that will really help you get ahead of competition, get ahead of that product launch. So that, how do you get mentions in publication and on trusted websites? Well, you do a combination of online and offline initiatives. You do something worth talking about. But I think that something we're talking about has to be effective, has to be relevant for your project and for your initiative and for your goals. And so, I do think sometimes you do get marketers and agencies like me who maybe sometimes they do overthink something. They're like, well, will that really achieve this goal? I don't think you get as much of that if you're doing like a movie or Coca-Cola.
So I was thinking about the hierarchy of marketing. I was thinking about, Hailey Bieber selling her company, Rhodes, to Elf for $1 billion. It's a 3-year-old company. I mean, they were doing $200 million. And the interesting thing about it was that they supposedly got $400 million worth of free earned media. That's a lot of free earned media. And you can do that when you're a celebrity and you have Kendall Jenner and you have all these celebrities sort of pushing this out through social media and all this stuff. But if you think about the hierarchy of that excitement, like what's going to go viral? What are people going to talk about and share online? What's credible? What are they going to buy because they think it's credible and other people think it's credible? So it sort of, it passes all the hoops that real marketers without the celebrity endorsement have to go through organically over a long time. And that's expensive to build a brand and to build trust. These guys leapfrog that right away. And it's like they're just immune to all that. But so the question is, how can somebody without celebrity get that free earned media? And there really is a hierarchy of this because I mean it's celebrity on top, right? And we already know that people like Ryan Reynolds, who made Mint Mobile, huge, and Casamigos with George Clooney, and of course, Mrs. Bieber with her Rhodes brand. There's that, but then there's also the stuff that us regular humans can do, like live events and parties with key opinion leaders and things like that, or getting patients or people to create UGC, like the Ice Bucket Challenge. There are these kinds of things that still get the snowball rolling down the hill, as we have this analogy. But don't require a celebrity. So I'm interested to sort of figure out what that hierarchy is of celebrity, live events, parties, UGC, whatever that hierarchy is, because I looked for it. It doesn't exist. And then figuring out how to incorporate that into all these different marketing programs, whether it be, marketing in general or healthcare specific. Because as you always say, you love the term, it depends, right?
That's right.
Everything. What do we do if we're selling this? Or what do we do if we're selling that? Well,
And I think so much more depends in pharma and biotech. Because a lot of things you're talking about can be fairly irrelevant. I mean, what's your definition of a celebrity when you're talking about like this niche oncology treatment that's not even launched yet, right? And so I think you're talking about working with advocacy organizations, working with KOLs, or the physicians who are running the clinical trials, right? You're talking about a very different type of celebrity who's probably a celebrity to a very small number of people, but those people matter to you and matter to your client.
Well, I think if marketers, as long, again, you don't have to throw $250,000 away in Times Square, but as long as you're really thinking about the entertainment value, and I don't mean that to be, look, you can't be sleazy about it, you can't be stupid about it, but it's got to be entertaining because there's so much stuff going on the web that if you don't cut through the noise, I mean, your signal to noise ratio is already so low. But if you can't have Hailey Bieber or Ryan Reynolds or George Clooney endorse your product, if you can't have a live event with the Jumbotron in Times Square, if you can't have a big party with a bunch of KOLs where people are taking pictures and posting those pictures online and there's something to share, then you need to at least have sort of almost like this ice bucket challenge where there's UGC, people talking about things, patient perspectives, how things can be used, what helped, what didn't help. You've got to do something. So I'm actually putting it on the screen now, this hierarchy of entertainment value and thinking about, yes, it depends what you're doing, but you've got to incorporate that. Otherwise, you're wasting your media dollars. And we sell native advertising. Again, we sell branded ads, we sell display. I think all of it should be used to further your earned media. So when you get earned media that's interesting, whether it be a product launch or somebody endorsing something or something exciting that happened, you use paid media to catapult that and get that further rolling down the hill, get that snowball rolling down the hill, right? Get the roller coaster up so it starts going down the hill again.
But I've seen some of these initiatives, sort of the man on the street videos at like these very niche physician conferences, right? Where you literally have somebody interviewing doctors and asking them funny questions about certain conditions. There's some things like that. There's also with patient and even HCP advocacy organizations, right? You can get some patient stories, and some of those can be more or less entertaining, kind of depending on the therapeutic category. But I think those collaborations with advocacy organizations or patient advocates themselves, getting creative, getting and fun. That's why I always like the word edutainment. It sounds a little cliche, but I mean, you and we first met doing continuing medical education, digital CD-ROM, back in the CD-ROM days.
Yep.
We were doing CD-ROM.
The pre-Cambrian era.
That's right. And we were, but that let's be honest, back then it wasn't that entertaining. It was kind of some talking heads on screen for long hours with like 10 question quizzes.
There was nothing playful about it, and that's what I mean. I mean, there's nothing playful. If you can't, hey doctor, it hurts when I do this. Well, don't do that. You know what I mean? And then get into the actual, tell a joke, lighten it up a little bit. I mean, there has to be something where you break through, because we live in such a pop culture world now. People are on podcasts. People are, doing fun things all the time, and so if you're going to try to take attention from that, which is entertaining, you got to be entertaining. You have to be entertaining. So
So I definitely agree with you. There's a place for some edutainment and like kind of pushing the envelope with MLR teams and client teams. I think there is a lot of it. We kind of know what works, and we call it blocking and tackling a lot in the industry, right? But there's some things that you just know you got to do. You need a website, and you need some sort of social presence. You probably need paid search presence. It's like you've already got a good portion of your budget allocated to something. I think clients really, and agencies themselves, need to really ask themselves, like, okay, what portion of our budget can be a little more experimental, can be a little more entertainment focused, and that MLR will also allow to be done. If
what's moving the needle, right?
Yeah, and what's moving the and quite frankly, are we willing to be experimental, but are we willing to not track something? I think a lot of these initiatives that you're mentioning, the kind of entertainment and edutainment type stuff, and offline and PR things, aren't necessarily directly trackable, right? And even tracking like Brandon mentions, or tracking earned media is difficult. I mean, you have to kind of pay PR type agencies and some of these tracking agencies to even kind of curate all that and really put a tangible number on it, right? So I think we're in a world where so much is trackable that a lot of times we get triggered a little bit of like, well, is it going to work? And I think it does takes a little bit of creativity out of it sometimes. So you just have to ask yourself some hard questions.
It's a lot to think about. I mean, ad tech in general, I think marketing in general today, there's a lot of facts and a lot of data we look at, and we don't necessarily ask the right questions, and we don't spend enough time pondering the question. I read a quote the other day about Einstein, and it was something, I'll probably botch the quote, but it was something like, if I had 1 hour to solve a problem to save my life, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the right question to ask. Because if you have the right question and you understand what the real problem is, the solution sort of becomes very apparent. And so I think, just talking with you and listening, I think that we don't spend enough time really thinking about what is the experience that we are generating for the consumer or the healthcare professional. Yes, we want to engineer this thing so that this outcome happens, but really, really stepping into their shoes and thinking about how can I respect their time and make it fun for them and really engage them in a way that's not necessarily totally ROI focused. Because I think if you get away from the ROI piece and you really think about stepping into their shoes to engage them, you're going to get the ROI piece. They're going to figure it out.
Totally.
Yeah, and
that's you're going to do some things that make all the trackable things better.
Right.
You're going to see your ROI go up on the things you can track if you do the right things that aren't trackable. And I love that quote, and I love that mindset. I mean, if you'd be very surprised on how much time I spend personally, but my teammates spend for clients, just really compiling questions. Whether we get an RFP that comes in, or whether we kick off a new project, or whether we're doing some planning. I mean, it's those upfront questions, those instinctive questions we have from our disciplines, and kind of curating someone from medical, and someone from the account planning side, and someone from digital and omnichannel and the creative side, and getting all of their points of views to come out and say, well, have we considered this? And what about this audience? And that curation and listing of questions that trigger a conversation becomes such a huge part of marketing and advertising when you're trying to do something creative, when you're trying to solve meaty problems. And it is a necessary step. A lot of times you're hampered by deadlines and timelines. The turnaround time is so long. Do we really have time to think? And I think that's part of our job, is like working with clients and letting them know that there's some thinking and conversation time that's necessary, but it'll make the output better, and it'll make the execution work faster, because there will be clear decisions that are thoughtful. And so questioning is one of the best things a marketer can do. And I think that's, a lot of times day in and day out, you're a marketer.
And to ponder on the question without answering it. Just ponder on it a minute. Let it rattle around in there for a second. So what am I really asking?
Those answers can come to you at those questions. The questions, if you're in your head, the answers can come at any time, whether you're in the shower, whether you're on a walk. And I think most people in the creative industry understand this, and marketers know this themselves too. And so if you're asking those right questions, and they're just like pondering back there, you clock out for the day, and then maybe that night at dinner, my kids crack
martini.
My kids crack up at me because I'll just get up. I'll be like, "Oh, I got an idea," and I'll literally leave the dinner table and I'll run into my notepad or get up on my phone and I'll start. I think I'm not the only one like that. I know plenty of people in this industry, plenty of friends I have who do the same thing. And you just need you need to ponder, you need to ask the right questions, and you need that sort of creative space and freedom to really think through solutions.
Well, this is great. Speaking of martinis, next time you're in town, let's go out for a steak and martini on Tap Native.
Yeah, it's a deal.
If you like listening to all things healthcare marketing, ad tech, and medical publishing, don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching What's on Tap. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share.